Welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. You found a quiet place for dark stories, rain outside the window, and a voice to keep you company through the night. Get comfortable. Let the world fade away. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and is this a late night for you or an early morning? And if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future nights here. Story 1. The Guest We Never Checked in For. I booked the remote airboat to finish my novel, but the silence I craved became the thing that almost killed me. My name is Ava, and for 6 months, I'd been trying to write the second act of a historical romance that was, frankly, going nowhere. My apartment in the city was a symphony of sirens, neighborly disputes, and the constant hum of bad plumbing. I needed a cabin in the woods. I found the Hemlock Retreat online. The photos showed a charming, if slightly dated, A-frame nestled in dense Washington forest, with a stone fireplace and a wall of windows looking into nothing but green. The price was suspiciously low for a whole month. The only review from 3 years prior simply said, "Quiet." I took it as a sign. The drive up was beautiful, the evergreen canopy closing over the road like a tunnel. But the first unsettling detail hit me when I pulled up. The key wasn't in the lockbox as instructed. It was already in the front door, as if someone had just stepped out. The second was the smell. Not damp earth or pine, but the faint, sweet-rot scent of forgotten flowers clinging to the living room despite there being no vase in sight. The third was the guest book. It sat open on the coffee table, the pen laid neatly beside it. Every single page was filled, not with notes, but with hundreds of meticulous, tiny drawings of the same thing. A closed door. Page after page, just that door, rendered in different stylish shaky pencil, careful ink, frantic ballpoint. The last drawing on the final page was slightly different. The door was ajar. I shrugged it off. Eccentric former guests, artistic expression, I was here to work. The first 2 days were blissfully productive. The silence was absolute, a thick blanket over the world. I wrote thousands of words. I made coffee. I watched the mist curl between the towering firs. The only sounds were the click of my keyboard and the creak of the old house settling. But on the third night, the silence changed. It wasn't an absence of sound anymore. It was a presence, a listening quality. I was sitting by the fire when I heard the first scratch. It was soft, deliberate, like a fingernail being dragged down the outside of the large window facing the woods. I froze, my heart a trapped bird. It came again from a different window this time, near the kitchen. A long, slow scrape. I spent the next hour with all the lights on, peering into the impenetrable blackness beyond the glass, seeing only my own pale, wide-eyed reflection. I told myself it was a branch, an animal, the house settling in a new way. I almost convinced myself. But then, as I was finally drifting into a fitful sleep, I heard the footsteps, not outside, inside. They were soft, shuffling steps, moving from the living room down the short hall and pausing right outside my bedroom door. My blood turned to ice. I lay paralyzed, straining to hear breathing, anything. After an eternity, the steps shuffled back the way they came. I didn't sleep. I didn't move until the gray light of dawn filtered through the curtains. The next day, in the harsh, rational sunlight, I felt foolish. A branch, the wind, my overactive, horror novel-primed imagination. I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The forest was beautiful, but unnervingly still. No birdsong, no chattering squirrels. Just the soft crush of pine needles under my boots. I found a small, overgrown clearing about half a mile from the cabin. In its center was a weathered stone well, its wooden cover splintered and half collapsed. The sweet-rot smell from the cabin was stronger here, emanating from the dark hole. A strange compulsion came over me to look inside. I leaned over the crumbling edge, peering down into the gloom. It was too deep to see the bottom. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw something pale caught on a protruding stone. It was a child's hair ribbon, faded and stained, but unmistakably a small white satin bow. A cold dread, deeper than the nighttime fear, seeped into me. I hurried back to the cabin, locking the door behind me. That's when things escalated. The scratches became knocks. Soft, polite raps at the front door that would come at exactly 3:07 a.m. I never answered. I'd press myself against the wall beside the door, holding my breath, listening to the nothingness on the other side. One night after the knocks subsided, I heard a new sound from the kitchen. The slow, deliberate turning of the ceramic salt shaker on the formica table. Scrape, pause, scrape. Id left it in the middle. Now it was at the edge. The guest book began to change. In the mornings, I'd find new drawings added, not of the closed door, but of the interior of the cabin. My coffee mug on the table. My laptop, my shoes by the door. The drawings were always from a low angle, as if the artist was a child sitting on the floor. I became a ghost in my own retreat. I stopped cooking, living on protein bars and cold water from the tap. I stopped using the bathroom at night, using a bucket in my room instead. The fear was a constant, sour taste in my mouth. I stopped writing. I started documenting. I set up my phone to record audio at night. The playback was mostly static, but in the middle of one recording, a small, clear voice whispered, "Ava, can you play?" I deleted it immediately, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. You know, when you're in the middle of something like this, your mind tries to find any logical anchor. It makes you question your own sanity before accepting the impossible. So let me ask you, the viewer, something. What's your personal line? What's the one piece of proof that would make you stop rationalizing and just run? A whisper with your name, an object moved. For me, it was the photographs. I'd taken a picture of the stunning view from the deck on my first day. I scrolled back to it one afternoon, seeking a memory of peace. The forest was beautiful, the light dappling through the trees. But as I zoomed in, my breath caught. Between two thick firs, barely visible in the shadows, was a small, pale figure. It looked like a child, but its face was a smudge of darkness. It was standing perfectly still, facing the cabin. I hadn't seen it when I took the photo. I went through every picture I'd taken since arriving. In 7 of them, the figure was there, sometimes distant in the tree line. In one, a blurry shape reflected in the living room window behind me as I cooked. It was getting closer. I called the host. The number went straight to a generic voicemail. I tried to look up the listing again, but my internet, always spotty, had died completely. I was marooned. That night the false safety arrived. No knocks, no scratches, no footsteps. The silence returned to its original empty state. I cried with relief. It was over. Whatever it was, it had gotten bored. I slept a deep, dreamless sleep for the first time in a week. I woke with a renewed, manic energy. I would pack and leave immediately. I practically danced through the cabin, gathering my things. I went into the small, windowless laundry room to grab my detergent. As I turned to leave, the door swung shut behind me with a soft, definitive click. I tried the handle. It was locked from the outside. Panic, hot and immediate, flooded me. I threw my shoulder against the flimsy wooden door. It didn't budge. I screamed for help, knowing no one could hear. I was pounding on the door when I heard the other sounds begin in the main house. The familiar, shuffling footsteps. Then the sound of my laptop keyboard being pressed. Not typing, just a slow, random pressing of keys. Click, 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 click. Then the sound of the kitchen faucet turning on and the slow filling of the kettle. A domestic symphony played by an invisible hand. Then the footsteps came down the hall. They stopped right outside the laundry room door. I backed into the corner, clutching a bottle of bleach like a weapon. The door handle jiggled, not trying to open it, just jiggling. Then from the other side of the thin wood, a small voice spoke. It didn't sound like a child's voice on the recording. It sounded wet and ancient and impossibly sad. "You didn't write your name in the book," it whispered, its mouth right against the crack in the door frame. "Everyone signs the book." I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. "I want to show you my drawings," the voice gurgled. "I've been drawing you. I'm almost to the end." The sound of a single sheet of paper being slid under the door followed. I looked down. It was a page from the guest book. The drawing was in thick, waxy crayon. It depicted the laundry room from a low angle. It showed me cowering in the corner, my face a perfect circle of terror. And it showed the door wide open. In the doorway stood a tall, slender shadow with too many long, spidery fingers reaching into the room. That's when the real knocking started. Not on the laundry room door. It was coming from inside the walls. A frantic, desperate pounding from within the sealed space between the studs, as if something was trapped in there and trying to get in with me. The drywall beside me bulged, a fist-sized lump punching outward, dust sifting from a new crack. Another bulge erupted near the ceiling. The pounding was everywhere, a cacophony of imprisoned fury. The sweet rot smell became overpowering, choking. The single light bulb flickered, and in the strobing darkness, I saw the cracks in the walls begin to bleed a thick, dark sap. I have no memory of what happened next. Pure instinct must have taken over. I remember the laundry room door suddenly swinging open, not into the hall, but inward, as if something had been leaning on it from my side and stepped away. The hallway was empty. The cabin was silent. I ran. I left everything, my laptop, my clothes, my unfinished novel. I just ran to my car, my keys miraculously still in my pocket, and I drove, sobbing, until I found a signal and called the police. They found nothing, of course. No guest book filled with drawings. No signs of breaking or entering. The well in the clearing, they said, was only 10 feet deep and empty. The ribbon gone. The police officer, a kind-eyed woman, suggested Id experienced a severe episode of isolation-induced psychosis. She recommended I see someone. I nodded, accepting the paperwork, the rational world closing around the memory like a sterile bandage. I'm back in my noisy apartment now. The sirens are a comfort. I'm trying to write again, but the words won't come. I keep all the lights on. And I've started a new habit, one I can't seem to break. Every night just before bed, I take out a fresh notebook and a pen, and I draw a door, a simple closed door. I fill page after page with it. It's better than the alternative. Because last night, as I was finishing a particularly detailed sketch, my pen ran dry. I reached for a new one from the cup on my desk, and my hand brushed against something small, cold, and smooth. I picked it up. It was a single white ceramic button, cold to the touch. I've never owned anything with buttons like that. I sat there, holding it, and from the wall behind my refrigerator, one that shares a pipe chase with all the other apartments, I heard a soft, wet, familiar whisper. It said, "You forgot your bookmark. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, that sense of something being just slightly off, then you understand. The world is full of quiet places, and sometimes they're a listening back. If you enjoyed this tale, please give this video a thumbs up. It helps more people find these stories. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next journey into the unsettling. And tell me in the comments, have you ever stayed somewhere that just felt wrong from the moment you arrived? What was the first detail that tipped you off? I read every single one. Until next time, sleep well and maybe leave a light on." Story 2. What my grandfather left in the attic. I should have listened when they said some doors are meant to stay closed. My name is Ava, and 6 months ago my grandfather passed away, leaving me his sprawling, old Victorian house on the edge of a town I'd never even heard of. It smelled of dust, lemon polish, and something else, something sweet and earthy that I couldn't quite place. The realtor said it was just the old books, but the scent seemed to gather in certain rooms, thickening in the corners. The only condition of the inheritance was that I live in the house for 1 full year before I could sell it. I saw it as a chance, a quiet place to finally finish writing my novel, away from the city's constant noise. The silence here, though, wasn't peaceful. It was a listening silence. The first week was fine, if you ignored the way the floorboards in the hallway creaked at exactly 3:17 a.m., a sound like a slow, heavy footstep, or how the reflections in the antique mirrors sometimes seemed just a fraction too slow to catch up with my movements. I chalked it up to an old house settling, to my overactive writer's imagination. Grandpa had been a reclusive man, a collector of oddities, and the house was a museum to his strange tastes. Shelves groaned under mismatched porcelain dolls, their glassy eyes tracking you. Cabinets held fossils and rusted tools, but it was the attic that called to me. The pull was almost physical. The door to it was at the end of the upstairs hall, a plain white door with a heavy iron latch always locked. I found the key on his keyring, labeled simply storage. I finally gave in on a rainy Tuesday. The key turned with a gritty, protesting screech. The stairs unfolded from the ceiling, shedding a shower of dust into the dim hall light. The air that drifted down was cold and carried that sweet, earthy smell at its strongest. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a space not filled with boxes, but arranged like a study. A large, claw-footed desk dominated the center. Bookshelves lined the slanted walls, but these books were hand-bound in dark leather, with no titles on their spines. On the desk sat a single, ornate wooden box about the size of a shoebox, carved with intricate, swirling patterns that seemed to move in the peripheral vision. And beside it, a note in my grandfather's shaky script. "Ava, if you're reading this, you've opened the door. Do not open the box. Burn this room. Leave this house." Now I have to ask you all something, because I think about it every night. What's the one rule someone gave you that you immediately knew you were going to break? For me, it was that note. The warning wasn't a deterrent, it was a prologue. I had to know. I didn't open the box, not at first. I respected the warning for a whole tense week, but the attic called. I'd find myself at the foot of those stairs without remembering the walk down the hall. I started dreaming of the carvings, feeling them under my fingertips. I began researching my grandfather, digging into town records. I found whispers, not facts. Stories of a man who dabbled in things best left alone, of a family pact made generations back, of something they called the keeper. The more I learned, the more the subtle wrongness in the house intensified. The 3:17 a.m. footsteps grew louder, closer to my bedroom door. The sweet smell began to seep under the door, tainting my sheets. One morning, I woke to find my own handwriting scrawled across a blank page of my manuscript. A single phrase repeated 100 times. "Let me out." The fear became a cold stone in my gut, but it was entwined with a maddening curiosity. The box was the answer. It had to be. I told myself I would just look, just see what was inside, and then I would close it. I would be in control. That's the lie we tell ourselves before everything shatters, isn't it? I brought the box down to the kitchen table, under the bright, modern LED light, as if that would sanitize its presence. The carvings weren't just patterns. They were a language, a series of interlocking symbols that hurt my eyes to follow. My heart hammered against my ribs as I lifted the lid. There was no flash of light, no demonic shriek. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, were three objects: a brittle yellowed bone, a finger bone, my mind whispered, a small vial of black sand, and a polished obsidian mirror, no larger than a compact. Disappointment washed over me, followed by a profound, eerie relief. This was it. These were the terrible secrets. I lifted the obsidian mirror. My reflection was dark, distorted, but it was me. I let out a shaky laugh. See, all in my head. A writer's paranoia fed by a creepy house and a melodramatic note. That night I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. The footsteps were silent. The house was just a house. I had faced the unknown and found it to be mundane. I decided to pack the things back into the box the next day and maybe even call a realtor to discuss my options post-haste. I was making coffee the next morning when I saw it. The kitchen window reflected the sunlit yard behind me, and in that reflection, standing calmly in the doorway to the hall, was a figure. Tall, impossibly thin, its features blurred and stretched as if seen through old, warped glass. It didn't move. It just watched my reflection. My blood turned to ice. I spun around. The doorway was empty. I told myself it was a trick of the light, the remnant of a nightmare. But then I caught my own reflection in the toaster's chrome side. The figure was now standing directly behind my reflected self, its long, thin hand resting on my reflected shoulder. Panic, pure and electric, shot through me. It wasn't in the house. It was in the reflections. Every shiny surface became a potential window. I covered the TV screen, the microwave door, the glass front of the oven. I drew all the blinds, but I couldn't cover my own eyes. It'd catch a glimpse in a spoon in the faucet's metal in the dark screen of my phone. It was getting closer in everyone. Its form became clearer, not a human shape, but something that approximated one, made of shifting shadow and that same sweet, decaying earth smell. It was learning my reflection. I tried to flee. I grabbed my car keys and ran for the front door. My own face stared back at me from the glass panel in the door, pale and terrified. And behind it, filling the reflection of the foyer, the thing loomed, its form now pressing against the inside of my own image like a parasite wearing my skin as a suit. I couldn't open the door. My reflection wouldn't move its hand to the knob. It just smiled, a slow, wrong stretch of my own lips that I wasn't making. I stumbled back, falling onto the rug. I knew then. Opening the box hadn't released it. Looking into the obsidian mirror had invited it in. It wasn't in the attic, it was in me. The climax wasn't a chase. It was a slow, horrifying takeover. The lights began to flicker, not with electricity, but with a reversal of light and shadow. Darkness became solid in the corners of the room, pooling and spreading. The sweet smell was so thick I could taste it on my tongue like rotten honey. I crawled to the kitchen, thinking of the box, thinking I could put the mirror back, trap it again. The box sat on the table, but the mirror was gone. From the darkened window over the sink, I saw my reflection pick it up from the table. My reflection held the obsidian glass, and in it, I saw not the thing, but my own true face, screaming silently, pounding on the inside of the glass. The thing wearing me in the reflection world was the keeper, and it had kept its bargain with my grandfather, a life for a life, a descendant to take his place. I was the new lock on the door. I don't try to leave anymore. The house needs an occupant to fulfill the pact. If I cross the threshold, the thing crosses with me into the world. My grandfather's warning was to save me. It was to save everyone else, so I stay. I write this down as a record. Sometimes at 3:17 a.m. I hear my own footsteps walking the hall, checking on the attic door. I feel its satisfaction, its ancient, hollow contentment. I look in the mirrors less and less now because the face that looks back is growing more familiar, more like mine every day. And the most terrifying part isn't the thing in the reflection. It's the part of me that's starting to agree with it, that finds the silence peaceful, that thinks the sweet smell is like home. The door is closed. I am the door. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, that sense of something lurking just out of sight, then you understand. Please, if you enjoyed this journey into the dark, give this video a like. It helps more than you know. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next tale of terror. And in the comments below, tell me, what's the one family heirloom or old object in your house that gives you the strangest feeling? I'll be reading I Have Nothing But Time now. Story 3. The House That Remembered My Name. I didn't believe in haunted houses, but I do believe in haunted people, and I think that's what I brought with me to the old apartment building. My name is Deb. After the divorce and the job loss, I needed a cheap, quiet place to disappear for a while, to piece myself back together. The ad for the one-bedroom on the top floor of the weathered brick building on Elmhurst Avenue was perfect. The rent was suspiciously low, and the landlord, a man with watery eyes named Mr. Burroughs, only asked for cash and didn't bother with a credit check. He handed me the keys and said, "It's been empty a long time. It might feel a little set in its ways." I should have listened to the warning in his tone, not just his words. The first week was blissfully uneventful. The apartment was furnished with old, heavy pieces that smelled of lemon polish and dust. The floorboards creaked a specific song when you walked from the kitchen to the living room. The radiator hissed and knocked like an old man clearing his throat. Normal old building stuff. The only thing that ever struck me as odd in the beginning were the scratches. Not on the floor, but on the inside of the front door, right by the deadbolt. Dozens of thin, parallel grooves, like something with claws had been trying desperately to get out. I told myself it was from a previous tenant's dog. But then the whispers started. Not voices exactly, more like the memory of voices, a faint, staticky murmur that seemed to come from the walls themselves, always just below the threshold of comprehension. It was worst at night when I was trying to sleep. I'd lie there in the dark and it would feel like a crowd was having a conversation in the next room, but with the volume turned all the way down. I chalked it up to old pipes or the wind in the alleyway. I was a man clinging to rationality, you see. It was all I had left. You know that feeling when you're home alone and you're absolutely certain for just a split second that you heard someone call your name. It's usually just your brain playing tricks, but in that apartment it stopped being a trick. It started softly. Dev a sigh from the kitchen when I was making coffee. Dev a murmur from the empty bathroom as steam billowed from the shower. It was always my name, always in a tone that was eerily familiar yet impossible to place. It sounded like concern sometimes, other times like a warning. All right, let me ask you all something because I think about this a lot now. What's your biggest fear? Is it something external like a monster or an intruder? Or is it something internal, the fear of losing your mind, of your own memories turning against you? For me, it became the latter. The escalation wasn't dramatic, it was insidious. The whispers grew slightly clearer. I started catching fragments. Don't go in there, and the key is under, and once, chillingly, he's starting to remember. I began waking up at exactly 3:07 a.m. every night, my heart hammering, with the overwhelming sensation that I had just been having a vitally important conversation, the details of which evaporated the moment I opened my eyes. The air in the bedroom would be ice cold, and the smell it was the distinct cloying scent of my grandmother's perfume, a perfume no one had worn since she died a decade ago. Grief, I told myself. Stress. Manifestations of my own broken state. Then the apartment began to reflect me, not in a metaphorical way. It'd leave a book face down on the armchair, go to the kitchen, and return to find it closed and back on the shelf. One morning, I found the faint, damp imprint of a hand on the bathroom mirror, a hand far smaller than mine. It'd see fleeting movements in the periphery of my vision, always the suggestion of a person darting just around a corner, but never anything solid. The worst was the feeling of being watched with a profound, aching sadness. It wasn't malicious. It was mournful. I reached a breaking point after the photograph incident. I kept a small, framed picture of my ex-wife and me on the dresser from happier times. I came home from a walk one afternoon to find it face down. I set it upright. The next day, it was face down again. The third day, the glass inside the frame was cracked, a single hairline fracture splitting our smiling faces apart. That night, the whispers were a chorus. I heard my father's voice, long dead, saying, "You have to fix it." I heard my mother sobbing. I heard a child giggling, a sound that froze the blood in my veins because I don't have any children. I called Mr. Burroughs, my voice shaking. He came over, listened to my fractured account with a face of stone. When I finished, he didn't offer sympathy or call me crazy. He just sighed, a sound of deep, weary resignation. "It's not the apartment, son," he said, his watery eyes avoiding mine. "It never is. This place, it's like a sponge. It soaks up the residue of people, especially people in pain. Your pain, your memories, your regrets. It holds on to them. And sometimes when someone new comes in, brimming with their own hurt, it stirs them all up. It replays them. So get an exorcist or something," I shouted, hysterical. He shook his head. "You can't exorcise an echo. You brought the sorrow with you. The building is just showing it back to you." He left, telling me my lease was month to month and I could leave whenever I wanted. That was the false safety, a logical explanation. It wasn't ghosts, it was psychic trauma, a feedback loop of my own misery. I felt a bizarre sense of relief. It was me. I was the problem. I could fix me. I decided to stay to confront my own demons, thinking the apartment was just a mirror. For 2 days, nothing happened. The silence was profound. I started to sleep through the night. I began to believe Mr. Burroughs was right. It'd been haunting myself. I started packing, deciding a fresh start somewhere truly neutral was the answer. That's when the building decided to show me it wasn't just a mirror. It was an archive. It was my last night. I was boxing up the last of my books when the single, overhead light in the living room began to dim, not to darkness, but to a dull, amber glow like old streetlight. The temperature dropped so suddenly my breath plumed in the air. The whispers returned, but this time they weren't fragmented. They were clear, layered, speaking over one another in a cacophony of familiar voice-me parents, my ex-wife, old friends, my own voice from different ages. And they were all saying the same thing, in a rising, desperate chant. "Don't look in the closet. Don't look in the closet. Don't look in the closet." The small, locked closet in the hallway, a closet Mr. Burroughs said had a lost key. A closet it'd never once felt the need to open was rattling. Not violently, but with a steady, rhythmic tap-tap-tap, like a small fist knocking from the inside. The chant in my head became a physical pressure. My own curiosity, a deep, primal dread, warred with the warning. The scratching on the inside of the front door, it hadn't been trying to get out. It had been made from inside the apartment. Something had been trying to get in. I don't know what compelled me to move. It felt like the current of my own life was pulling me toward that door. I picked up a heavy fireplace poker from the hearth. With a trembling hand, I inserted the tip into the small gap where the old hasp lock met the strike plate. I levered it. The wood splintered with a sound like a bone breaking. The door swung inward. There was no monster, no skeleton, no physical horror. The closet was empty except for one thing. On the back wall, written not in dust or paint, but in what looked like thousands of tiny, precise scratches in the plaster, same kind of scratches on my front door, was a map. A map of my childhood hometown, a place I hadn't thought of in years. And on it, marked with a glaring, deeply gouged X, was the location of my grandfather's old tool shed, a place I hadn't seen since I was 8 years old. A place where a terrible accident happened, an accident involving my younger cousin, an accident whose details my family had sworn never to speak of again, and which my mind had dutifully completely buried. As I stared, the whispers coalesced into one voice, my own voice, but as a child, terrified and sobbing. I didn't mean to lock the door. I didn't mean to. I forgot. The closet wasn't a space in the apartment. It was the locked door in my own memory. And the apartment had just handed me the key. The map wasn't on the wall for anyone. It was for me. The building hadn't been replaying my pain. It had been diagnosing it, leading me to the source of the infection it brought inside. The horror wasn't in the room with me. The horror was the truth, waiting for me back in a place I'd spent a lifetime running from. The whispering stopped. The light returned to normal. The room was just a room again. I stood there, the cold fireplace poker hanging limply in my hand, the map seared into my vision. I finished packing in a numb silence. I left the city at dawn. I didn't drive home. I am driving now, the road unfurling under my headlights. The turnoff from my old hometown is about 50 miles ahead. I have to see if the shed is still there, because the house remembered what I made myself forget, and now, so do I. Thank you for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, that sense of something lurking just out of sight, then you understand. Please, if you enjoyed this journey into the dark, show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more tales of the unexplained and the terrifying. And in the comments below, tell me, if you moved into a new place and it started showing you pieces of your own past, would you stay to learn the truth, or would you run and never look back? Story 4. The dream I should have never woken from. I should have known something was wrong when I stopped dreaming of anything else. My name is Ava, and for 3 months I lived in a state of perfect, blissful sleep, only to discover the waking world had become the real nightmare. It started after my grandmother passed away. The grief was a physical weight, a constant ache in my chest that made even breathing feel like a chore. My parents, worried and helpless, suggested I take some time away. They offered me the keys to the old family cabin, a place I hadn't been to since I was maybe 10. It's quiet up there, Ava, my mom said, her hand on my cheek. The mountain air, the silence, it'll help you process. I agreed, desperate for any change of scenery, any escape from the suffocating reminders of Nana in our suburban home. The drive was long, the roads narrowing from highways to county routes to a single, winding gravel path that clung to the side of the mountain. The cabin itself was exactly as I remember, yet smaller, more warm. A sturdy, 2-room structure of dark-stained logs, perched on a lip of land that overlooked a vast, silent valley of pines. The air did smell different, crisp and clean, laced with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. I carried my bags inside, the old wooden floorboards groaning in familiar protest. The first unsettling detail was the absolute quiet. It wasn't peaceful, it was a vacuum. No distant traffic, no hum of appliances, just a profound, heavy silence that seemed to press against the windows. The second was the state of the main room. Everything was meticulously clean, almost sterile, except for a thick layer of dust on all the picture frames and the old wood-burning stove. It was as if someone had cleaned the surfaces but deliberately avoided touching the memories. The third was the bedroom. The iron-framed bed was made with crisp white linens that smelled faintly of lavender, a scent Nana used to love. But on the nightstand, placed with deliberate care, was a small, polished river stone and a single, unlit black candle. No note. I shrugged it off as one of my mom's quirky attempts at creating a soothing atmosphere. The first night, I slept deeper than I had in years. It wasn't just rest. It was a complete and total absence. I closed my eyes and then instantly it was morning. No fragments of dreams, no tossing and turning, just a seamless jump through time. I woke feeling genuinely rested, the heavy grief momentarily lifted. I spent the day hiking, reading, feeling almost human. Night 2 was the same, a plunge into perfect, dreamless oblivion. By the end of the first week, I was addicted to it. The grief was still there during the day, but it was manageable, softened at the edges by that incredible restorative sleep. I stopped checking my phone. The silence stopped feeling oppressive and started feeling sacred. I even lit the black candle one evening, enjoying the way its faint, smoky scent mixed with the lavender on the sheets. That's when the dreams finally came. Or rather, the dream. It was always the same. I'd find myself standing at the edge of the woods behind the cabin, not in the darkness of night, but in a perpetual golden hour dusk. The air was warm and sweet. And Nana would be there, sitting on her old rocking chair from my childhood home, which was placed impossibly in the middle of a wildflower meadow that didn't exist in the real world. She'd smile, pat the chair beside her, and we'd talk. Not about her death or my grief, but about silly, inconsequential things: the recipe for her lemon cake, the name of that stray cat she used to feed, the way the light came through the kitchen window in the afternoon. It felt so real, more real than waking life. Her hand felt warm in mine. I could smell her rosewater perfume. I'd wake with tears on my face, but they were happy tears. The longing was still there, but it was being answered nightly. The cabin became my sanctuary. The waking world grew slightly duller, the colors less vibrant. I started going to bed earlier, eagerly anticipating the dusk world and my time with Nana. But then, subtle changes bled into the dream. The golden light would sometimes flicker like a faulty bulb. The edges of the meadow would darken, the trees leaning in closer. Once I saw a figure standing deep in the tree line, just a tall, thin shadow. When I pointed it out to Nana, her smile tightened. "Don't look at the woods, my sweet girl," she said, her voice a little sharper than I remembered. "Just keep your eyes on me." I did. I think that was the moment I truly stopped questioning it. I just accepted this incredible gift. But the waking world began to push back. The cabin's silence started to feel watchful. I'd hear footsteps on the gravel path outside, but find no one. The black candle would be found in different positions, though I was sure I'd left it unlit on the nightstand. One afternoon, I found the river stone placed squarely in the center of my pillow, and I was so tired during the day. Not physically, I was still sleeping 10 hours a night, but soul tired, as if the dreaming was taking more energy than it gave. My reflection in the old, spotted bathroom mirror began to look gaunt, my eyes holding a glassy, distant look. I started talking to Nana out loud when I was alone, asking her questions about the dream as if she could hear me. Sometimes I felt like she could. So let me ask you guys something, because I've wondered about this every day since. Have you ever had a dream that felt more real than reality? A place or a person in your dreams that you long to get back to? It's a powerful feeling, isn't it? That longing can make you ignore a lot of warning signs. The breaking point came on a Thursday. In the dream, Nana was quieter than usual. The golden light was tinged with green like the sky before a tornado. The figure in the woods was closer, just at the edge of the meadow. I couldn't make out a face, only a sense of impossible height and a suit that seemed to absorb the fading light. "It's almost time, Abba," Nana said, her voice sounding thin and strained. "You have to choose to stay. When you wake up, you must break the stone. Break the stone and the candle, then come back to bed. Promise me." I promised, clinging to her hand. I woke not to sunlight, but to a deep pre-dawn gloom. The cabin was freezing, and I was not alone in the bed. I could feel the weight of another body next to me, the dip in the mattress, the chill radiating from it. I lay paralyzed, staring at the log ceiling. A slow, rhythmic scraping sound came from the other side of the room. Scrape, drag, scrape, drag. With a courage I didn't know I had, I turned my head. The figure from the woods was in the corner of my bedroom. It was tall, its head bowed to fit under the ceiling. It was dressed in a dark, outdated suit, its limbs too long and thin. It wasn't scraping anything. Its long, bony fingers were simply dragging along the wall back and forth, peeling away flakes of old paint and log bark with each pass. It hadn't noticed I was awake. This was my moment of false safety. The thing was distracted. If I could just slip out, get to the car, I moved an inch. The floorboard shrieked. The scraping stopped. The figure didn't turn, but its head tilted like a bird listening. I held my breath. After an eternity, the scraping resumed. I counted to 100, then slid from the bed, my bare feet silent on the cold floor. I made it to the doorway, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The main room was darker than it should have been. The windows were black as if coated in tar. I focused on the front door, just 10 steps. My hand closed around the cold iron of the door handle. I turned it. It was locked. The key was on the hook beside it. I reached for it, my fingers fumbling. A whisper, dry as dead leaves, filled the room. It didn't come from the bedroom. It came from right behind me. "You promised her." I screamed and spun around. The thing was there, having moved without a sound. It filled the space, its face a blur of shadows and stretched, pale skin. It had no eyes, just deep, dark sockets. But I could feel it looking at me, looking into me. "I didn't promise you anything," I yelled, backing against the door. "The stone, the candle, break them, stay asleep. It is kinder." Its voice was a chorus of whispers, echoing with Nana's tones but layered with something ancient and rotten. It took a step closer, the scent of damp soil and extinguished candle wick washing over me. This was the climax. This was the confrontation. This thing, this dream eater, this whatever it was, had used my grief, my love for Nana as bait. It had created a perfect trap in my own mind. The dream wasn't a gift, it was a feeding ground, and it wanted me to go back under permanently. "No," I whispered, defiance sparking through the terror. I remembered Nana's real smile, her real laugh, the way she'd tell me to be brave. This shadow in a suit was not her. It was a thief. I lunged, not for the door, but for the fireplace. I grabbed the iron poker. The thing hissed, a sound like steam escaping a grave. It flowed toward me, its movements all wrong, disjointed and too fast. I swung the poker in a wild arc. It passed through the thing's chest as if through smoke, but a wail of fury shook the cabin. Pictures fell from the walls. The windows rattled. I swung again, this time at the small table where the river stone and black candle sat. The poker connected with a crack. The stone split in two. The candle shattered. The scream that erupted wasn't just in the room. It was inside my skull, a torrent of rage and hunger and loss. The dark shape blurred, unraveling like smoke in a gust of wind. The pressure in the cabin popped. And then silence. Real, empty silence. Dawn was breaking, casting weak gray light through the now clear windows. I was alone, standing amidst the wreckage, the iron poker still clutched in my shaking hand. I left that morning. I didn't pack, I just got in the car and drove, the splintered stone and candle wax left on the floor. I never went back. The dream stopped. The deep, perfect sleep is gone. Now I'm lucky to get a few fractured hours. I see a therapist. I take medication. The grief for my real Nana is back, raw and sharp, but it's mine. It's real. Most people think I had a psychotic break brought on by grief and isolation. Sometimes I almost believed them. It would be easier. But I know what I saw. I know what offered me comfort in exchange for my waking life. And sometimes in the dead of night, when sleep finally comes, I don't dream of a sunny meadow. I dream of a dark cabin, and from within a faint rhythmic scraping sound begins. I always wake up before I see what's making it, but last night I didn't. Last night in the dream I was back in the cabin bed, and I felt the mattress dip beside me as something cold climbed in. I lay there, paralyzed, staring at the log ceiling. And from the corner of the room, a dry, whispering chorus that sounded like Nana and nothing like her said, "You're almost back." I woke up screaming. And on my nightstand in my apartment hundreds of miles from that mountain was a single, cold shard of polished river stone. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, that sense of something lurking just out of sight, then you understand why I had to share it. If you want to hear more tales from the edge of sleep, please hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. And in the comments, I'd love to know what's the one dream you've never been able to forget. Be careful with your answer. You never know what might be listening. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for more horror stories.